There we go.
Yes.
Perfect. So I, by no means, am going to pretend that this is backed by data, science, or even logic. This is just another hypothesis, if you will, that I've developed over the last year or so, and I refer to it as chasing the line. I don't think that anybody with an MD or PhD has actually theorized this and put this to paper, but I've heard bits and pieces in podcasts and TED Talks, not as a whole, but just itty bitty pieces. And so chasing the line is my opinion that we all establish some pretty key baselines in our life. And the dictionary defines baseline as an imaginary standard of value to measure or compare. And so if I can make this switch, when we look at establishing our baselines, a lot of it has to do with our personal upbringings and, more importantly, time and experiences. These baselines shift and grow over the years as we develop, learn, travel, meet people, etc. And when I first thought of this wasn't too long ago, but my example here is the Mexican restaurant, and it's a pretty simple story. I love my sister and her husband to death. They have never traveled anywhere. They enjoy very small town America, and when I say small town, like small town. They moved from one itty bitty little town in Wisconsin to another itty bitty little town in the hills of South Carolina. And they were so excited to bring us to this Mexican restaurant. They're like, this is mind blowing good food. You're going to love it. They had established a baseline for what their expectation of or what their enjoyment level of this food was. And so I had set an expectation as we're pulling up to I'm like, this is going to be good. This is going to be great because they believe it's great. And so we pull up, we sit down, we walk in, and first and foremost, it's predominantly Caucasian people in there. And the wait staff is all Caucasian. And you peek back into the kitchen and it's all Caucasian. And we order our food. And we started, Haley and I, with some pretty basic stuff. We started with quesadillas, some fajitas, and then we were really, really simple on this, nachos. We got the food, and my sister and her husband are digging in. They're oohing and eyeing, and Haley and I start digging in, and we take like a bite of something, and we're like, this is what you think great Mexican is? The nacho meat, like it was ground beef, but it felt like I was eating cat food. It was just real gritty, and it was covered in this what should be cheese, but was more of like a cheese-like substitute. But I say all of that because time and experience and upbringing, location, they've set a bar for a baseline of what is good food. I set that baseline to say that we establish our own expectations and baselines for what we consider good or quality in many key areas of our lives. For me, and there's a lot of baselines that we carry, but for me, I think the most important ones are relationships, our careers, and our mental and physical health or well-being. We set expectations and bars for what we think our relationships should be like and how we interact with it. The partners, the people in our lives. From a career perspective, I think we all personally are here at Kasasa and on this team because we set really high bars or baselines for our performance, our work, and our output. And then last but not least, which is an incredibly important baseline to cover, is mental and physical health or well-being. If we set a low baseline expectation, we're probably not going to feel good mentally or physically. But if we set a baseline like Craig's, where he runs like a monster all the time and expects himself to, he's going to look and feel good. And his mental health is probably pretty good too, because I know running takes a ton of mental exercise. It's just as much of a mind game as it is a physical game. And so we set these high expectations for ourselves, but we also set expectations of what we perceive others expect of us in these baselines or these areas. And so we perceive that people always want us to be at the baselines that we've established for ourselves or above those baselines. In reality, people really don't expect that of themselves. If we go back to that 6 feet around us analogy, they really only care about their own personal baselines. They're not really thinking about it, but it affects us when we perceive what others expect of us. And that puts a lot of pressure on us in the ways that we perform in those respective areas, whether it's our career, our relationships, or our personal mental health and physical health. And so we perceive that people always want us to be on point, the ability to juggle multiple things, whether that's kids, a spouse, Mike Davis, Craig. We expect or perceive that people think that we should be able to handle or understand all things and be a jack of all trades, that when we're hit with a question or a task, we're able to tackle it with ease, and to always have this, we're constantly winning or above that baseline mentality. And that's not necessarily a healthy thing to do. So we have to balance these baselines and set expectations that are healthy for ourselves, but also force us to chase the line and to constantly grow and be better. So when we focus on just one area, and again, I don't think there's necessarily any logic. This is a hypothesis. There's no data or MD out there that's saying this. This is just Aaron thinking this, but it's from me looking back over the last 9 years as I've reflected. And when I focused on just one singular baseline, let's say it's my career and I've watched this happen, if I focus just on my career and I forget about the baseline expectation I've set for my relationships and my mental and physical health, my career might excel, but those other areas definitely suffer. And so you need to put the time and balance into each of those areas. And what I found interesting as I look back, when I did give equal attention to those key areas, I was actually more successful in those baseline areas than I was just focusing on a singular one. I did well in my career at one point, and I think I still will and continue to, but I could have done better. And I think that balance is really important, simply because when we feel good, we do good. Simple statement, but I think it really, talks about, so if you feel good inside, if you feel good mentally, you're going to perform well and have the capacity to perform well in those other baseline areas. So ultimately, chasing the line to happiness, and hopefully this ends up playing. This is a small anecdote from a guy named Jason Segel, a former actor from How I Met Your Mother and plenty of other movies. But he's kind of played around with this hypothesis as well. This is just an interesting little statement from a podcast he was on recently, and hopefully you can hear this.
Now to be like, well, you made something that you are so proud of, and then a few 100,000 people it was very meaningful to, and what more do you want? Like, at what point do you let yourself say, I won? Because if you don't figure out a way that you're going to feel good, you will feel like behind for your whole career, your whole life,
I think that, that balance is key. Being able to spread that equal focus is going to lead to success in each of those key areas that I personally for myself established and strive to balance. And back to Jason's point, and this is more so a question for me, when am I going to allow myself to feel good or say that I won in those different areas? Because at some point when you are just about at baseline or above baseline, you kind of get this euphoric high, like a winner's or a runner's high I would refer to. And so being able to chase but manage those expectations and balance those baselines, again, is going to lead to feeling better, doing better in each of those categories. And my last sentiment here, as I land the plane, is balance is really key in each of these areas. And balancing all of those areas is going to lead to success and, I think, personally better lives as a whole. But our baseline expectations can ultimately hurt us. At some point, to Jason's point, when there's got to be a line where we say, I've established a point where I've won, or otherwise you're going to feel like you're missing the bar, missing the baseline in your career and your personal life, your entire life, and something's got to give. Or eventually, as Anne Lamott says, expectations are resentment in the making, and resentment doesn't sit well in one's mind or heart. And so if you set expectations or baselines that are too high, you don't balance them, you're not hitting them, you're ultimately going to deteriorate your performance in each of those areas. And that, at the end of the day, is my idea of chasing the line.
Good job, man.
Thanks.
That's awesome, brother.
Love that you quoted Anne Lamott.
She's a smart lady.
I go to bed reading her books and laughing often. What are you laughing at? She's got some really great stuff.
Any questions for Aaron? Any thoughts?
Fire away.
Yeah, there you go. Any feedback?
What are your 3 categories? Relationships, work, and
Mental and physical health.
Cool.
Where's this Mexican restaurant?
Woodruff, South Carolina. You never, ever,
Stay
ever.
away.
That's hilarious.
It's funny you have
Great job,
that
man.
analogy. I had a similar story where I love this hole in the wall Mexican place where I used to live, and took my in-laws, and well, they had the same experience you had. They come out with like bits of trash in their drinks and stuff, and I was like, oh, this was a really bad experience in the first place. But yeah, I get crap for that all the time. But I think I'm also out. I think I've had good Mexican. I think they just had one bad experience.
I'm not willing to give that another experience.
Yeah, my in-laws aren't either. So.
Well, guys, I got to tell you, I'm enjoying these every week. So really appreciate that, Aaron. Appreciate the time that you put in on it. That was great, man.
Thank you.
So, all right, as we wrap up here, hang on.